Hello, everyone. I'm Tanya Rivero. Thank you for joining us. President Trump is in the Midwest today to promote his policies on job creation and trade. But the visit comes amid concerns about the impact his policies will have on American farmers. This afternoon, the president held a roundtable event in Iowa focused on workforce development after touring a manufacturing lab. Later today, he heads to Illinois, where he will give remarks on trade. Both states are at risk of being hit hard by retaliatory tariffs. The president's visit comes after he and the president of the European Commission announced a tentative deal to put the trade feud on hold and work toward zero tariffs. It includes European plans to buy more U.S. goods and efforts to address current tariffs on steel and aluminum.
Basically, we opened up Europe, and that's going to be a great thing for Europe, and it's really going to be a great thing for us, and it's going to be a really great thing for our farmers.
We want to turn to Sean Sullivan. He's a congressional reporter for the Washington Post and joins me from Capitol Hill. Sean, Trump yesterday announced a tentative trade deal with the EU, but you wrote that before that, trade war fears reached a fever pitch. What more can you tell us?
They really did reach a fever pitch, Tanya. A lot of Republican members of Congress were getting very, very concerned about the impact of Trump's trade policies on their states and also the impact on the midterm elections. There were a lot of Republicans who feared they could lose key races and maybe even lose control of Congress as a result of some of these trade policies that we saw from President Trump. It got so serious that, in fact, one Republican senator in a private luncheon earlier this week told his colleagues he wasn't seeing as many of those red "Make America Great Again" hats around his state when he would go home. And so there was certainly a lot of concern, a lot of worry from Republicans on the Hill. And I think now they're breathing a little bit of a sigh of relief now that we've seen this U.S.-EU deal come to fruition, now that we're potentially on the brink of easing some of these sanctions. But there's still some skittishness, there's still some wait and see among Republicans. But look, a lot of Republicans just didn't like the protectionist trade policies that Trump had put forward. They worried about the impact it would have on the economy in their states. But the reality was a lot of them were not really willing to stand up to President Trump directly. Right now, they're happier than they were, but we'll see where this goes because, you know, we've seen over the last few months this road has taken a lot of twists and turns. We don't ultimately know what the president's going to do next, which deals might fall apart, which deals might work out. So it's definitely a rocky road for Trump and his own party as they deal with trade, as they deal with tariffs moving forward.
Well, Sean, you say that in the wake of President Trump's meeting with EU officials, you say that, you know, there's a sigh of relief, but I'm curious, are they waiting to see results, or is that meeting enough? Because nothing really substantial came out of it. Did it?
Yeah, they're waiting for results.
Yeah.
The line that I heard from a lot of Republicans as I talked to on the Hill yesterday afternoon said, this is a step in the right direction, looks like we're moving the right way, but let's wait and see. Let's wait and see what happens in the next few months. So there's a lot of nervousness because I think Republicans realize they don't know which way this president's going to go. At any given moment, he could decide to rip up a deal. At any given moment, he could decide to sign a new deal. And they don't know where he stands, and it's caused a lot of anxiety, I think, up here as we move closer to the midterm elections.
And the farmer bailout is also still in the works. So, Sean, are free market Republicans okay with this kind of government handout as another temporary fix?
Well, it's interesting, you know, traditionally speaking, you would see a lot of Republicans rail against this and say this is the government going in, picking winners and losers, spending government money, spending taxpayer money to prop up certain industries. And you can imagine under a different scenario with a Democratic president trying to do something like this, you might see uniform Republican resistance to this idea. But we are seeing some, even traditional conservative Republicans, side with the president on this. And I think that shows you the strength that he still has politically in the Republican Party right now, even though he's become a very polarizing figure and one that a lot of Democrats and a lot of moderate voters don't like. He's still very popular in the Republican Party right now, so I think you're seeing a lot of Republicans bite their tongue when it comes to this, and they know that if they speak out too sharply against the president, it could backfire on them politically.
Yeah, because there has been that group of Senate Republicans in particular who've been pretty vocal about the president's trade policy. Are they a little quieter today?
They are a little bit quieter today. We're not hearing the same sort of intense chorus of concern. But again, we don't know where this goes. I mean, in a matter of days or weeks, we could be back to where we were earlier this week, which was on the verge of really full-scale panic about this, especially, like I said, when you have these states that are so key in the midterm election, states like North Dakota, Missouri, Tennessee, Indiana, that are, that stand to be hit pretty hard by a trade war.
Sure.
Campaign strategists have been pretty concerned about the impact this could have and how this could reduce the chances that Republicans would win in these states that otherwise they should have a pretty good shot at winning.
Just another week of whiplash in Washington. We're getting used to that, right, Sean? All right. And meanwhile, a group of conservative Republican lawmakers have filed a resolution to impeach Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. What is their argument, and what are they hoping to achieve with this?
Well, they've grown frustrated with Rosenstein. They want him to produce more documents related to the Russia probe. But what this has done is has exposed more divisions in the House Republican Conference. We heard Speaker Paul Ryan today come out on a different side of this and not endorse this tactic. So what you have are the hard right members of the House Republican Conference, the Freedom Caucus members led by Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan, saying enough is enough, we want to go after Rosenstein. On the other side, you're seeing more traditional moderate Republicans say, well, let's pump the brakes a little bit. This is not necessarily the right approach. And so, the House is preparing to leave town for a long August recess. And this is not the tumultuous note that House Republican leaders wanted to depart on as they prepare for their summer.
I want to play what Speaker Ryan had to say about this today.
It is appropriate that we conduct oversight of the executive branch and that we get full compliance with the executive branch on what are very legitimate document requests. Do I support impeachment of Rod Rosenstein? No, I do not.
So, is this likely to go anywhere?
Well, that remains the question of the hour right now. And Paul Ryan is the Speaker of the House. He does have the power. He does have control. However, if we start to see a big number of Republicans start to band together, start to rally around this idea, he may not have a choice but to move forward on something like this, at least politically speaking. So it's too early at this point to figure out exactly how this is going to end up, but certainly not the kind of development that you want going into the recess if you're Paul Ryan.
Absolutely not. All right. Now, while we are on the House, Freedom Caucus member Jim Jordan confirmed he is running for Speaker. If Republicans retain control of the House this fall, does he stand a chance?
We'll see. It depends on a lot of different factors, including who all is in the race, what that House majority looks like, and what the direction of the conference will be. And then the really biggest question is, what does Trump do? Is he going to stand on the sidelines? Is he going to go in and try to endorse somebody or pick somebody, or at least make it known who he likes? We know he has a great deal of respect for Kevin McCarthy. We know he likes Steve Scalise. So we'll see what Trump does in that situation, and we'll see what the mood of the conference is coming out of this election. If there's a desire to move to the right, to say, you know what, we need to fully abandon some of the moderate principles that have governed, some of our actions in recent years, or do we see a move back to the middle? Do we see Republicans say, hey, enough is enough, we've been too far to the right, we need to come back and try to appeal to moderate voters? In that scenario, somebody like Jim Jordan would not stand much of a chance. So certainly it's a long shot for Jordan, but as we've seen in Congress and in Washington in the last couple of years, nothing is out of the question until we actually see these votes and see these negotiations happen.
Nothing is out of the question, indeed. Sean, lastly, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo defended the administration from rare bipartisan criticism in a Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing yesterday, where he was asked about the Trump-Putin summit and other foreign policy. I want to play what he had to say about that private meeting with Putin.
The president was very clear with Vladimir Putin about U.S. positions. They're the U.S. positions that are the Trump administration's positions, and he spoke about them very firmly and clearly when he met with Vladimir Putin.
And he told you that?
Senator, I'm telling you what he had a conversation with Vladimir Putin about, and I'm telling you what U.S. policy is today. These are important decisions about how much to disclose about private conversations we're had, because everyone knows that you may have an expectation that you'll have another private conversation one day. And the absence of their belief that that private conversation has the capacity to remain in that space reduces the freedom to have those conversations.
So, Sean, there was very little. The president told me this in Pompeo's testimony. Are Senate members at all satisfied with the answers they got from Pompeo at that hearing? I mean, some of the senators say, all I've learned from this is that you know as little as we do.
Yeah, I'm not sure that they are satisfied. They've had a lot of questions and concerns about the very basic question of what was said at this meeting. And remember, let's put this in perspective. This was a meeting between Trump and Putin that only included a translator from the U.S. side. This did not include, for a great deal of this discussion, top-level administration officials, aides, national security officials, things of that nature. And so Republicans and Democrats have been scratching their heads and trying to figure out exactly what was said. And that was a risk going into this meeting without having Trump surrounded by some of his top aides. What did he actually say? And so you heard in that exchange right there, Pompeo laying out his impression of what was said. And, the public either has to look at what he said, take his word for it, or be skeptical about it, because the reality is, at this point, there is no fully objective 100% credible, indisputable record of what was said because it was a private conversation and even top administration officials were not included. So, no, I don't think members of Congress are fully satisfied with what they've heard so far because it's been very little.
And Sean, before I let you go really quickly, I'm just curious, do we know who proposed the private meeting? Was it Putin and President Trump who agreed to it, or vice versa?
Well, remember, leading up to the meeting, the Russians said, hey, these are the terms that the Americans want. And going into the meeting, it seemed that the president was comfortable with these terms. You've seen administration officials, express comfort with this. But again, there were a lot of lawmakers. In fact, some Democratic lawmakers wrote a letter to the president in advance of that meeting saying, hold on a second, you've got to have somebody else in here with you because you're meeting with somebody who they said they didn't think they could trust and might, manipulate the outcome of this meeting and might spin it as something that it wasn't. And so, yeah, it is, something that I think a lot of lawmakers have been concerned about. And next time, this is a question that I think the administration is going to have to face when they have such a high-level diplomatic meeting.
Absolutely.
Like this one.
Sean Sullivan in Washington, thank you.
Thanks, Tanya.